In the early hours of June 13th, 2025, under the cloak of darkness, a pivotal moment in Middle Eastern history was unfolding. Israel shattered the uneasy calm of the Middle East, initiating a high-stakes operation that would reverberate across the globe. The decision to act was born out of years of escalating tensions and growing concerns over Iran's nuclear ambitions. It began with a sweeping aerial assault on Iran's nuclear facilities, a calculated risk designed to neutralize what Israel perceived as an existential threat. Israeli warplanes, utilizing advanced stealth technology and sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities, penetrated Iranian airspace undetected. They struck deep inside Iran with pinpoint accuracy, delivering a devastating blow to the country's nuclear infrastructure. The primary targets included Natanz, Fordow, and Arak, sites at the very heart of Iran's nuclear ambitions, facilities meticulously constructed and heavily guarded. The strikes aimed to dismantle years of research and development, setting back Iran's nuclear program by years. Explosions rocked Iranian cities, sending shockwaves through the nation. The sudden eruption of violence jolted residents awake, plunging them into a new and terrifying reality filled with uncertainty and fear. The operation was a bold gamble, a high-stakes move with potentially far-reaching consequences. It risked igniting a full-blown regional war, drawing in other nations, and destabilizing an already volatile region. The primary objective was to cripple Iran's nuclear program, to dismantle its capacity to develop nuclear weapons, and to send a clear message: Israel would not tolerate a nuclear-armed Iran, viewing it as an unacceptable threat to its national security. Air raid sirens blared across Iranian cities, a chilling soundtrack to the unfolding crisis. Anti-aircraft fire lit up the night sky, a desperate attempt to repel the incoming attackers. But Iran's defenses were largely ineffective, overwhelmed by the sophistication and intensity of the Israeli assault. The Iranian government was slow to respond, initially paralyzed by the surprise and magnitude of the attack. They were caught completely off guard by the scale and precision of the attack, struggling to comprehend the extent of the damage. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the ravaged landscape, the world watched anxiously, bracing for Iran's response to this unprecedented act of aggression, unsure of what the future held. The long-simmering conflict had finally erupted into open warfare, shattering the fragile peace of the region, and the region stood precariously on the edge of a potential catastrophe, teetering between diplomacy and all-out war. In the aftermath of the devastating strikes, the true extent of the damage inflicted on Iran's nuclear program began to emerge. Satellite images, offering a stark bird's-eye view, and harrowing on-the-ground reports painted a grim picture of devastation at Iran's most critical nuclear sites. The scale of destruction was immense, far exceeding initial estimates. Natanz, the crown jewel of Iran's uranium enrichment efforts, and Fordow, the deeply buried underground facility once considered impervious to attack and potent symbols of Iran's nuclear progress, were left in ruins, a testament to the sheer force and precision of the assault. Buildings were reduced to rubble, equipment lay scattered and broken, evidence of bunker-busting munitions, designed to penetrate even the most fortified structures, and surgical precision, indicating a meticulously planned and executed operation aimed at minimizing collateral damage while maximizing impact on key nuclear infrastructure. The IAEA, the International Atomic Watchdog, issued a stark warning, highlighting the potential radiological risks and condemned the attack in the strongest terms, characterizing it as a reckless blow to global nuclear safety and security protocols. The strikes not only crippled Iran's uranium enrichment capabilities, setting back its nuclear program by years, but also threatened to unleash a humanitarian and environmental crisis, raising fears of radioactive contamination and long-term health consequences for the surrounding population. While Israel may have achieved a significant tactical victory, degrading Iran's nuclear capabilities in the short term, the attack also galvanized Iranian national resolve and stoked fervent calls for revenge, potentially leading to further escalation and instability in the region. Tehran, defiant in the face of adversity, vowed to rebuild its damaged nuclear facilities. But behind the bravado and public pronouncements, Iranian leaders privately faced a multifaceted crisis. how to respond to the attack in a way that would deter future aggression without triggering an all-out war that could engulf the entire region. The long-simmering shadow war, fought in the shadows through covert operations and proxy conflicts, was definitively over. Open conflict, with all its inherent risks and uncertainties, had officially begun. The world, holding its breath, braced for the next move in this dangerous game of brinkmanship, acutely aware that the stakes had never been higher. Iran's response was swift and fierce, fueled by grief and anger. The supreme leader's fiery speech promised severe revenge, echoing through mass rallies where crowds chanted for Israel's destruction. The IRGC, reeling from losses, launched drones and missiles in symbolic retaliation, signaling Iran's arsenal remained potent. National unity surged, with even government critics rallying against the external threat. State media broadcast patriotic fervor, while leaders plotted a strategy of asymmetric warfare, activating proxies across the region. Iran's goal: bleed its enemies through attrition, not direct confrontation. The promise of revenge was real, but Iran would choose the time and place. The deadly chess game had only just begun. On June 28, Tehran held a massive state funeral for the high-profile casualties of the Israeli strikes. The coffins of top generals and nuclear scientists were paraded through streets packed with mourners, transforming grief into a show of defiance. The deaths of Major General Bagheri and General Salami left a leadership vacuum at a critical moment. The loss of leading scientists underscored Israel's intent to cripple not just infrastructure, but expertise. State eulogies cast the dead as martyrs, fueling public outrage and vows of retribution. Officials promised resilience. For every fallen leader, more would rise. The funeral became a symbol of Iran's resolve to fight on. The message was clear. Iran was wounded but far from defeated. The precision of Israel's attack sparked a ruthless hunt for spies within Iran. Security forces launched a sweeping crackdown, arresting hundreds, military, officials, academics, and civilians, on charges of collaborating with Israel. Human rights groups decried arbitrary arrests and fast-tracked executions, warning of a climate of fear and paranoia. High-profile cases, like the execution of alleged Mossad collaborators, sent a chilling message. The regime used the crackdown to silence dissent and reassert control, blurring lines between security and political opposition. Iranian society grew suspicious and fearful as the search for external enemies turned inward. The cost of the intelligence failure was now being paid by Iran's own people. As war loomed, the United Nations issued urgent calls for restraint. The UN Secretary General warned of a spiraling crisis, urging both sides to step back from the brink. The strikes had already displaced thousands, creating a growing refugee crisis and immense civilian suffering. The IEA condemned attacks on nuclear sites, warning of radiological disaster and a blow to non-proliferation norms. Yet the UN's power was limited. Security Council divisions made enforcement impossible. The organization was left to mediate and appeal to the world's conscience. The stakes had never been higher. The Middle East teetered on the edge of a new era of violence. Russia, with deep interests in the region, called for restraint as the crisis escalated. The Kremlin warned of absolute unpredictability, fearing the conflict could destabilize its alliances and economic interests. Russia's balancing act, ally of Iran in Syria, partner to Israel, was under severe strain. Moscow's statement criticized Israel's unilateral action and urged a return to dialogue and multilateral solutions. Russia positioned itself as a potential mediator, contrasting its approach with the West's interventionism. Yet, its influence was limited, and skepticism ran high in Tel Aviv. Still, Russia's warning added to the global chorus, urging peace as the region edged toward disaster. On June 23rd, a date that would be etched in the annals of international conflict, tensions in the Middle East took a dramatic and dangerous turn. Iran escalated the conflict, taking a bold and provocative step that reverberated across the globe. This action signaled a significant departure from previous engagements and a willingness to directly challenge U.S. interests in the region. They launched a barrage of ballistic missiles, targeting the U.S. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, a critical hub for American military operations in the Middle East. The choice of target was not accidental. It was a calculated move designed to send a clear message. The attack, codenamed Operation Glad Tidings of Victory, was more than just a military strike. It was a carefully orchestrated political statement intended to reshape the balance of power. It served as a direct and unmistakable message to Washington, a stark warning about the potential consequences of U.S. foreign policy in the region. The message was clear. Unwavering U.S. support for Israel would not be without repercussions, and Iran was prepared to act decisively to protect its interests and challenge the status quo. By directly striking a major U.S. military base, a strategic asset vital to American operations, Iran unequivocally demonstrated its expanding military reach and its growing confidence in projecting power beyond its immediate borders. This bold action signaled Iran's willingness to escalate the conflict beyond its own borders, transforming the regional landscape and raising the specter of a wider, more devastating war. Adding another layer of complexity, Iranian officials reportedly issued warnings to both Qatar and the United States prior to the strike, a move that suggested a desire to control the narrative and limit unintended consequences. This preemptive communication aimed to minimize potential casualties and, perhaps more importantly, to avoid triggering a full-scale war that could engulf the entire region. The entire operation reflected a pattern of Iranian strategic thinking: to retaliate against perceived aggressions, but to do so in a manner that carefully manages the risk of uncontrolled escalation. As the news of the attack spread like wildfire, the world watched with bated breath as the United States found itself facing a critical and potentially history-altering choice: whether to retaliate with force, risking a descent into a full-blown regional war with unpredictable consequences, or to exercise restraint and pursue a path of diplomacy fraught with its own set of challenges. The conflict had now transcended regional boundaries, taking on a global dimension, with the world's superpowers now standing directly in the crosshairs of a potential and devastating confrontation. The stakes had never been higher, and the world held its breath, bracing for what might come next. As June ended, the Middle East teetered on the brink of catastrophic war. Each attack and counterattack risked spiraling into all-out conflict, with millions of civilians in harm's way. A wider war would draw in neighboring countries and non-state actors, unleashing a humanitarian crisis of historic proportions. The specter of nuclear escalation loomed, as damaged facilities and desperate leaders threatened to shatter decades of non-proliferation. The world's calls for peace grew more urgent, but the path to de-escalation was narrow and fraught. Only immediate dialogue and compromise could avert disaster. The choice was stark: negotiation or devastation. The time to choose peace was now, before the region and the world paid the ultimate price.